want to take you all back to the late 90s, to a 2-bedroom apartment on the 6th floor of a Toronto high-rise, where you would find my younger brother Yusuf and I every weeknight from 5:30 until 8:30 p.m. at the dinner table being supervised by our mom. And she was there to help with and make sure that we finished our homework. And even when school didn't assign us anything, she always managed to assign us homework herself. I don't know how. Now, the shocker is that both Yusuf and I often didn't make evenings easy for her. Both of us would rather spend our time doing anything else except for homework. And every now and then, when one of us was feeling bold and confident, we would stand up to her and we would ask, "What's the point to all of this? This math homework's hard." Her response was always consistent after she would smack one of us upside of our heads. Life isn't going to get any easier from here. So sit back down and finish these last 3 math problems. 20-something years later, she was right. Life is hard, and the world is changing. And not just in the change as a constant changes, it's changing quickly. Generative AI is predicted to displace a lot of professions. We continue to navigate an uncertain economy, and socially and politically, we live in a world that's more divided than ever before. And the complicated part is that all of these changes are happening at the same time. It's a lot. Writer and former chief risk officer Richard Buchstaber earlier this year predicted that we're entering into an era of radical uncertainty, a time where not only do we have no idea about what is to come, but a time in where we're going to be caught by things that we didn't even imagine. COVID was a perfect example of that. And while we know that life is uncertain and that change is inevitable, how often do we find ourselves prepared for it? For many of us, not often. But there's good news, though. Every one of us in this room here today can set good foundations to prepare, and that's what I want to spend the next few minutes talking to you all about. I came across this concept called SMAC formulas in the book Great by Choice by Jim Collins. SMAC, which stands for specific, methodical, and consistent, can be defined as a set of durable practices that create a replicable and consistent success formula. Plainly put, it's finding a few things that work really well and sticking to it. There are 3 parts to SMAC. The first is specific, which refers to a practice that is clear-cut. It's precise. There is no SMAC if you cannot clearly spell out this part of the formula, and it has to be a practice that's 100% within your control. Then there's methodical. Methodical refers to just the part where you're thorough about the practices that you pick, because those practices are going to lead to positive outcomes. And consistency in SMAC just means sticking with it. I came across the concept during a challenging time at work for me back in the summer of 2020. I work in sales. No, that does not mean that I annoy people for a living. And working in sales can be tough. Working through a health epidemic and an uncertain economy is a different story. And the hard part isn't just hearing more no's than usual from customers. That's part of the job. But the hard part were the many places I was being hit with pressure. Pressure from my manager, pressure from my company, pressure from my customers to get out of contracts, pressure to keep up with the competition, pressure to meet performance targets, pressure just to keep my job. And while I was reading the book, I started to become fascinated by successful businesses, not just the big ones we hear about all the time, but even the ones that get little to no airtime, like Rising Tides Car Wash down in South Florida. Running a business is hard. Running a successful one is even harder. The discipline, the rigor, the constant uncertainty, the fanaticism that goes into figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and then sticking to the things that do work with no guarantee for success. And while I was reading the book, I started to realize that the pressures I faced as a seller weren't just unique to me. Business leaders and companies face even bigger pressures too. However, successful leaders and companies do a few things that most companies don't. And one of those things is establishing a set of practices that they religiously follow, also known as SMAC. After I digested the concept, a light bulb went off. I found practical advice hidden somewhere unusual, a business book of all places. I asked, can I apply this business concept and apply it to my personal life? I mean, think about it. Like a business, I as a human deal with uncertainty. I deal with chaos. I deal with unpredictable cycles. I think there's something here. Yeah, I can apply it to my personal life and improve my personal and professional performance. I want to call out the Rising Tides Car Wash Company down in South Florida because they're a great example of a company with a well-defined SMAC formula. With a workforce where 80% of their employees are autistic, their SMAC formula has enabled them with success that's unheard of for most companies. For starters, they're one of the highest volume car wash chains in all of Florida, and their SMAC formula consists of practices that put their employees at the center of everything that they do. Practices like creating clear job responsibilities for their employees. Practices like creating efficient processes that every employee can follow to get the job done. Practices like only hiring empathetic and organized managers to lead their teams. And as a result, they have an employee retention rate that's 5 times higher than their competition. Their entire operation is efficient, consistent, and profitable. All of this in an industry that's affected by intense competition, seasonal changes, and strict environmental regulations. John Wooden, the late famous UCLA coach who went on to win 10 NCAA championships back in the 60s and 70s, is also another example of someone who embodied SMAC formulas. Now imagine an 18-year-old freshman who gets to his first day of practice, and he's excited. He's excited about competing with some of the best in the country, learning from one of the best coaches of all time, and he gets to his first day of practice. And he's surprised about what's being covered on the first day. Coach doesn't have them going through passing drills or shooting drills. Coach has every player from freshman up until senior learning how to do what? Properly tie their shoes and put on their socks. You heard me right. Learning how to properly tie their shoes and put on their socks. And the reason for that was learning how to do both avoided blisters or from shoes coming off in a close late game situation where the stakes are high and one loss could determine the entire future of the season. You see, Coach Wooden's coaching philosophy was all about controlling what you can control, minimize your risks, which is what made him and his players so successful and what SMAC is all about. Now, as Collins puts it in the book, one of the best things about SMAC is that it helps us sustain high performance even under the most extreme conditions. Now, like I mentioned, y'all, back in 2020, your boy was under a lot of pressure. And I realized that the solution lied in smacking some sense into myself. My personal SMAC formula involved putting together a holistic set of practices that were designed to drive the best performance out of me. That way, if something unexpected with life or with work or in the world came up, I had a set of practices that I was firmly rooted in to help drive the best performance out of me and to be able to cope with the unexpected. I have good news for you all. SMAC formulas are not complicated. In fact, by design, they're supposed to be short, simple, and thorough, like the examples in the book. And we don't have to create something for a Fortune 500 company or a car wash business or even a college basketball team. It took me a couple hours over 2 weeks to put together mine, which ultimately resulted in the 5 following practices, also known as Ahmed's SMAC formula. That's $1 million formula, y'all. For example, we see specific with waking up at 5 a.m. every day, except for Sundays, not Sundays, versus something generic like waking up early every day. And waking up at 5 a.m. is 100% within your control, by the way. It's methodical because each of the 5 practices was researched and carefully handpicked to help me improve both my personal and professional performance. For example, spend at least 30 minutes or invest at least 30 minutes into professional development every evening versus spend all my evening watching Netflix because I knew that that over time would give me the edge that I needed to perform at work. And it's consistent because each practice has a frequency that I can stick with, even on those days when I don't feel like it, and we know those days. So I have spent at least 30 minutes on low-intensity exercise because I know that after a long day at work, when all I want to do is chill, I can at least invest 30 minutes on a walk outside, rain, shine, or snow. I want to take you all back to that dinner table in Toronto. Now, one of the best breakthroughs I had in math growing up is that most problems followed a formula. When you followed the formula properly, you generally get to the answer. And when Yusuf and I showed our mom we understood this concept consistently, it generally led to some sort of a reward or extra 20 minutes, like extra 20 minutes of television or ice cream, not a smack in the back of our heads. My reward as an adult with smack is peace of mind and improved personal performance. You see, my goal today wasn't to offer you all breakthrough advice. My goal was to offer something that was practical to help us smack through the unpredictable world that we find ourselves in today. A simple way to control what we can control. You see, one of the things I learned from the book and from my own personal experiences is that when we commit ourselves to good practices, we're capable of getting the best out of ourselves, especially when we are specific, methodical, and consistent. You know, my mom was right. She loves hearing that. Life is hard. So I invite you all to consider this. How might smack help you prepare for the unpredictable, uncertain, and hard stuff that life has in store for us? Thank you.